You know how sometimes life throws you into situations that change everything? Well, this story starts with one of those moments. A moment that rocked the world of basketball and turned into a national conversation about fairness, respect, and accountability. Caitlin Clark wasn't just another player on the court. She was a force of nature. From the first time she stepped onto the WNBA stage, people couldn't stop talking about her. Her game spoke for itself. Lightning-fast passes, pinpoint accuracy from three-point range, and a killer instinct that left opponents scrambling. But it wasn't just her skills that made waves. Caitlin had this magnetic personality that drew fans in. She worked hard, stayed humble, and let her performance do the talking. And trust me, her performance did a lot of talking. Her rookie season was nothing short of legendary. Records were broken, arenas were packed, and social media buzzed with hashtags celebrating her every move. People who hadn't cared much about women's basketball before suddenly found themselves glued to their screens whenever Caitlin played. She became more than just an athlete. She was a symbol of hope, talent, and what happens when someone refuses to settle for anything less than greatness. But not everyone was cheering. In fact, some folks seemed determined to rain on her parade. One name kept coming up in whispers behind closed doors: Elle Duncan. Now, if you've ever watched sports commentary, you might recognize her. She's sharp, opinionated, and doesn't shy away from stirring the pot. Some love her for calling things as she sees them, while others think she crosses lines that shouldn't be crossed. Either way, no one could deny that Elle always knew how to make headlines. One evening, during a live segment, Elle decided to share her thoughts on Caitlin's meteoric rise. At first, it sounded like typical criticism, the kind athletes hear all the time. "She's overhyped," Elle said, leaning forward in her chair like she was about to drop a bombshell. "People are acting like she's the second coming of Michael Jordan." The camera zoomed in slightly, capturing the intensity in her eyes, but then something shifted. Her tone hardened, and her words took a turn that nobody saw coming. "Let's be real here," she continued, her voice cutting through the air. "If we're being honest, part of why she gets so much attention has nothing to do with her game. It's because she fits a certain image. You know what I mean?" The room went silent, for a split second anyway. Then the reactions poured in. Viewers at home froze, rewinding the clip to catch exactly what they thought they'd heard. Social media exploded almost instantly. Fans demanded answers. Was Elle implying what they thought she was implying? Had she really gone there? What made things worse was the timing. Caitlin wasn't just any player, she represented progress. She inspired young girls everywhere to pick up a ball and dream big. So when Elle's comments hit the internet, they didn't land softly. They ignited a firestorm. People weren't just upset, they were furious. Comment sections filled with angry messages accusing Elle of racism and bias. Supporters of Caitlin rallied together, defending her character and pointing out the hypocrisy of attacking someone simply because they succeeded. The WNBA didn't waste any time responding. Within hours, the league released a statement condemning LA's remarks, calling them unacceptable and damaging to the values we stand for. They emphasized their commitment to inclusivity and equality, making it clear that such behavior wouldn't be tolerated. It was a bold move, but also a risky one. By taking a stand, the WNBA opened itself up to even more scrutiny. Would this strengthen their reputation as leaders in promoting fairness? Or would it backfire and alienate viewers? As the days passed, the controversy only grew louder. Late-night talk shows joked about it, podcasts dissected every angle, and debates raged online. Some argued that Elle's comments were blown out of proportion, that she was just sharing her honest opinion, however unpopular it might be. Others insisted that intent didn't matter. The impact of her words was undeniable. No matter where you stood, one thing was clear: this wasn't going away anytime soon. For Caitlin, though, it was personal. Imagine waking up one morning to find your name trending. Not because of your latest win or a highlight reel, but because someone questioned whether you deserved your success. That's exactly what happened to her. Friends close to Caitlin revealed that she spent hours scrolling through social media, reading both the supportive messages and the hateful ones. It weighed on her, as it would on anyone. She wanted to focus on basketball, on improving her game, on inspiring others. Instead, she found herself caught in the middle of a storm she never asked for. And yet, despite the chaos, Caitlin handled it with grace. She didn't lash out or retaliate. Instead, she leaned on her teammates, her family, and her faith. They reminded her of why she started playing in the first place, to bring joy to people, to push boundaries, and to prove that hard work pays off. Slowly but surely, she began to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about standing up for what's right even when it's hard. Meanwhile, Elle Duncan faced mounting pressure from all sides. Her network scrambled to distance itself from the controversy, issuing apologies left and right. Sponsors started pulling their support, leaving her future uncertain. Behind the scenes, sources claimed that Elle felt blindsided by the backlash. She believed her comments were misunderstood, taken out of context. But intentions don't erase consequences, and the damage was already done. By the end of the week, it was clear that this incident wasn't just a blip on the radar. It was a turning point, a moment that forced everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about race, privilege, and the power of words. Whether you agreed with Elle or supported Caitlin, one thing was undeniable: the sports world would never be the same again. And that's where our story begins, not with a bang, but with a spark that lit a fire, igniting conversations that needed to happen. Conversations about who gets celebrated, who gets criticized, and why. Conversations that challenged us to look beyond the surface and ask ourselves, what kind of world do we want to create? Stay tuned, because this is only the beginning. When the dust from Elle Duncan's comments finally started to settle, the WNBA made a move that sent shockwaves through the sports world and beyond. They didn't just issue another statement or call for an apology this time. No, they went straight to the courts. The league filed a lawsuit against Elle Duncan, accusing her of perpetuating harmful stereotypes and damaging their reputation. It wasn't just about one person's opinion anymore. It was about protecting the values the WNBA stood for: equality, respect, and unity. The lawsuit argued that Elle's words weren't just careless, they were reckless. According to the WNBA, her remarks reinforced outdated ideas about who deserves recognition in sports and why. And let's be honest, when you're talking about a league built on breaking barriers and giving women athletes the spotlight they deserve, those kinds of accusations hit hard. Fans rallied behind the decision, saying it was long overdue. Others, though, thought the WNBA was overreacting. Social media lit up like never before, with hashtags trending left and right. People debated late into the night. Was this really about racism, or was it just free speech gone wrong? What made things even more intense was how fast the story spread. Within hours, news outlets picked it up, turning it into a national headline. Late-night talk show hosts joked about it, podcasts dove deep into the details, and even casual sports fans found themselves glued to updates. You couldn't scroll through your feed without seeing someone weigh in. Some praised the WNBA for taking a stand, while others accused them of trying to silence dissenting voices. It felt like everyone had an opinion, and most weren't holding back. For Caitlin Clark, the player at the center of it all, life became surreal. Imagine waking up every morning to see your name plastered across headlines, not because of your game-winning shot or your incredible stats, but because someone questioned whether you earned your success fairly. That's what Caitlin faced daily. Her phone buzzed nonstop with notifications. Messages poured in from fans offering support, but there were plenty of hateful ones too. Strangers dissected her career, her personality, her very existence, all based on something she hadn't even said. Friends close to Caitlin revealed that she struggled to process everything. She tried to stay focused on basketball, practicing harder than ever and leaning on her teammates for strength. But it wasn't easy. How could it be? Every time she stepped onto the court, cameras followed her every move. Reporters shouted questions about the controversy instead of asking about her performance. Even during games, fans held up signs referencing the drama. It was exhausting, overwhelming, and sometimes downright cruel. Still, Caitlin didn't crumble under the pressure. Instead, she leaned on the people who mattered most: her family, her coaches, and her closest friends. They reminded her of why she started playing basketball in the first place. It wasn't for fame or glory, it was for the love of the game. They encouraged her to block out the noise and focus on what she could control: her work ethic, her attitude, and her commitment to lifting others up. Slowly but surely, Caitlin began to find her footing again. She realized that this moment wasn't just about her, it was bigger than her. It was about standing up for fairness and proving that talent should always speak louder than bias. Meanwhile, Elle Duncan's world was unraveling. Once a household name in sports commentary, she now found herself at the center of a firestorm. Sponsors who had proudly partnered with her began pulling their endorsements one by one. Brands distanced themselves quickly, issuing statements condemning her remarks and reaffirming their commitment to diversity. Behind the scenes, sources claimed that Elle felt blindsided by the backlash. She insisted that her comments were misinterpreted, that she never meant to offend anyone. But intentions don't erase consequences, and the damage was already done. Publicly, Elle stayed quiet for days, letting her lawyers handle the legal side of things. Privately, though, she reportedly struggled to come to terms with what had happened. Friends described her as shaken, unsure of how to rebuild her career, or if she even could. For someone whose livelihood depended on being in the public eye, the sudden silence was deafening. Every interview request was declined, every appearance canceled. It was clear that Elle's future in sports media hung precariously in the balance. As the weeks dragged on, the tension only grew thicker. Supporters of Caitlin organized rallies, both online and offline, calling for accountability and change. They argued that Elle's comments weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a larger pattern of bias against certain athletes in predominantly black leagues. On the flip side, some defended Elle, claiming that freedom of speech was under attack. They accused the WNBA of overstepping and warned that punishing opinions would stifle open dialogue. Debates raged everywhere, from living rooms to locker rooms, from classrooms to corporate boardrooms. Even within the WNBA itself, opinions were divided. Some players applauded the league's decision to take legal action, saying it sent a powerful message about standing up against discrimination. Others worried that suing a commentator might alienate fans and create unnecessary division. Coaches and executives weighed in too, adding their perspectives to the mix. Everyone seemed to agree on one thing: this situation was unprecedented. Never before had a controversy like this rocked the league so deeply. By the time the initial flurry of reactions died down, one thing was undeniable. The impact of Ella's words had rippled far beyond what anyone could have predicted. It sparked conversations about race, privilege, and opportunity, not just in sports but in society as a whole. People began reflecting on their own biases, questioning the narratives they'd accepted without challenge. For better or worse, this incident forced everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about how we view success, who gets celebrated, and why. And yet, amidst all the chaos, there were glimmers of hope. Young fans continued to cheer for Caitlin, seeing her not just as a player but as a role model. Schools incorporated discussions about equality and representation into their curriculums, inspired by the real-world example unfolding before them. Athletes from other leagues reached out to offer solidarity, reminding Caitlin that she wasn't alone in facing adversity. Slowly but surely, the conversation shifted, from anger and division to understanding and growth. Of course, none of this meant the storm was over, far from it. With a lawsuit pending and emotions still running high, the road ahead promised to be rocky. But for now, the focus remained on moving forward. For Caitlin, that meant continuing to play the game she loved with passion and purpose. For Ella, it meant grappling with the fallout of her words and deciding what kind of legacy she wanted to leave behind. And for the rest of us, it meant watching closely, waiting to see how this chapter in sports history would unfold. Because one thing was certain: whatever happened next, it wouldn't be forgotten anytime soon. Behind the scenes, life for Caitlin Clark was anything but normal. While the world debated her worthiness and dissected every word Elle Duncan had said, Caitlin faced a personal battle that few could truly understand. On the surface, she appeared strong, focused on practice, delivering stellar performances on the court, and smiling through interviews as if nothing fazed her. But behind closed doors, the weight of it all pressed down hard. Friends close to Caitlin revealed that she spent hours scrolling through social media late at night when she should have been resting. It wasn't just the hateful comments that got to her. It was the sheer volume of opinions. People who didn't know her personally were suddenly experts on her career, her character, even her intentions. Some accused her of riding coattails or benefiting from unfair advantages, while others defended her fiercely, calling her an icon for future generations. Both sides were loud, unrelenting, and impossible to ignore. There were nights when Caitlin questioned whether she deserved any of this backlash. Did she do something wrong? Was there some hidden flaw in her game or personality that made people so eager to tear her down? Her teammates noticed the toll it took on her. During practice, she'd push herself harder than ever before, almost like she was trying to outrun the noise in her head. Coaches pulled her aside more than once, reminding her that no one expects perfection, that she was human after all. Her family played a huge role in keeping her grounded. They flew out to see her whenever they could, sitting in the stands during games and cheering louder than anyone else. Afterward, they'd sit with her in hotel rooms or back at home, talking about everything except basketball. They reminded her of where she came from, the small-town gymnasium where she first fell in love with the sport, the countless hours spent perfecting her shot, the joy of playing simply because it felt right. Those conversations helped her remember why she started this journey in the first place, not for fame or recognition, but because basketball made her happy. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in. One teammate shared how Caitlin once asked her, "Do you think I belong here?" The question stunned everyone. How could someone so talented, so dedicated, feel like they didn't deserve their place? But that's what happens when negativity surrounds you. It starts to seep in no matter how strong you are. Her teammates rallied around her, assuring her that yes, she absolutely belonged. She earned her spot fair and square, and anyone who said otherwise didn't understand the sacrifices she'd made to get there. Meanwhile, Elle Duncan's life spiraled in a completely different direction. Once a prominent voice in sports commentary, she now found herself isolated and unsure of her next move. Anonymous sources close to her described her as devastated, not just by the public backlash, but by the realization that her words had caused real harm. She reportedly spent days replaying the interview in her mind, wondering how things went so wrong so quickly. At first, Elle tried to defend herself. In carefully worded statements released through her lawyers, she claimed her remarks were taken out of context. She argued that she never intended to offend anyone and that her comments were meant to spark discussion, not division. But those explanations fell flat with most people. Fans weren't interested in excuses. They wanted accountability. And as sponsorships dried up and job offers disappeared, Elle began to grasp just how serious the situation was. Privately, friends said Elle struggled with guilt. She confided in a few trusted colleagues, admitting that she hadn't fully considered the impact of her words before speaking them aloud. It wasn't malice, they insisted. It was carelessness. But in today's world, carelessness can be just as damaging as intent. As the weeks dragged on, Elle became quieter, avoiding public appearances and retreating from the spotlight she once thrived in. The tension between the two women, and the larger issues surrounding their feud, only grew more complicated. Supporters of Caitlin organized online campaigns, flooding social media with messages of encouragement and solidarity. Hashtags like #Stand with Caitlin trended globally, showcasing clips of her best plays and testimonials from fans whose lives she'd touched. Young athletes posted videos of themselves practicing, saying Caitlin inspired them to chase their dreams despite the odds. On the flip side, some continued to defend Elle, arguing that holding individuals accountable shouldn't mean destroying their careers. They pointed out that mistakes happen and that growth requires forgiveness. These arguments sparked heated debates across platforms, with both sides digging in deeper. For every person calling for justice, another urged compassion. It was messy, emotional, and exhausting, but also undeniably important. Amidst all the chaos, the WNBA worked tirelessly to navigate the fallout. League officials met with players, coaches, and sponsors to discuss how to move forward. They knew this controversy wasn't just about one player or one commentator. It was about setting a precedent for how the league handled discrimination and bias moving forward. Transparency mattered, but so did unity. Finding the right balance wasn't easy, but leaders within the organization remained committed to doing what was best for the players and the sport. For Caitlin, though, the focus remained on basketball. She leaned heavily on her faith, using prayer and reflection to find peace amidst the storm. Off the court, she poured her energy into community outreach programs, visiting schools and hosting clinics for young athletes. Seeing kids light up when they met her reminded her of her own childhood dreams and gave her renewed purpose. If she could inspire even one kid to believe in themselves, then maybe all this pain would be worth it. As time passed, the intensity of the drama began to fade or at least shift. The lawsuit against Elle loomed large, with legal teams preparing for what promised to be a high-profile trial. Meanwhile, Caitlin kept playing, letting her performance speak louder than any headline ever could. Each game became a statement, each basket a reminder of her resilience. Critics may have doubted her, but she refused to let them define her. Backstage, though, whispers lingered. Would this incident mark a turning point for the WNBA, forcing the league to address long-standing inequalities? Or would it divide fans further, creating rifts that couldn't easily be healed? Only time would tell. What was clear, however, was that neither Caitlin nor Elle would emerge from this unchanged. For Caitlin, it was a test of character, a chance to prove that she was more than just a target of controversy. For Elle, it was an opportunity for redemption, if she chose to take it. And for everyone watching, it was a moment to reflect on the power of words, the importance of empathy, and the responsibility we all share to lift each other up rather than tear each other down. Because in the end, sports aren't just about winning or losing. They're about connection, inspiration, and the stories we tell along the way. And this story, messy as it was, wasn't over yet. When the lawsuit finally made its way to court, it felt like the entire sports world and beyond was holding its breath. The courtroom was packed with reporters, fans, and curious onlookers, all eager to witness what many were calling the trial of the decade. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but that didn't stop people from gathering outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of anyone involved. This wasn't just about two individuals anymore. It had become a symbol of larger societal issues. And as the proceedings unfolded, emotions ran high, not just in the courtroom but across the globe. The WNBA's legal team came prepared. They painted a picture of systemic bias, arguing that Elle Duncan's remarks weren't isolated incidents, but part of a pattern of discriminatory behavior against athletes who didn't fit certain expectations. They presented evidence showing how comments like hers reinforced harmful stereotypes about meritocracy and opportunity, ultimately undermining decades of progress toward racial equality in sports. It wasn't just about one player or one league. It was about fairness, representation, and respect. One of the most powerful moments came when they called witnesses to testify. Former colleagues of Elle spoke about her history of divisive remarks, recalling instances where she'd made similar comments during broadcasts or private conversations. Some admitted they hadn't spoken up at the time, fearing backlash or believing it was harmless banter. But now, seeing the impact of her words, they regretted staying silent. Their testimonies added weight to the WNBA's case, painting a clearer picture of the damage caused by unchecked rhetoric. Experts on race relations in sports also took the stand, explaining how coded language can perpetuate inequality. They broke down the subtle ways biases creep into commentary and media coverage, often without people realizing it. One expert described it as a double standard, pointing out how achievements by some athletes are celebrated universally, while others face constant scrutiny and doubt. The courtroom listened intently as these experts connected the dots between Ella's remarks and broader patterns of discrimination. On Elle's side, her defense team argued passionately for free speech. They framed the lawsuit as an attack on open dialogue, claiming that criticism, even controversial criticism, is essential to healthy debate. They insisted that Elle's comments, however poorly worded, were protected under the First Amendment. Her lawyers emphasized that intent mattered more than perception, arguing that Elle never meant to offend anyone. Instead, she was simply sharing her opinion, a right guaranteed to everyone. To support their argument, they called witnesses who vouched for Elle's character. Former co-workers described her as sharp-witted and passionate, someone who thrived on challenging norms and sparking discussions. Others pointed out that Elle herself came from humble beginnings, working hard to build her career in a competitive industry. These testimonies humanized her, reminding everyone that behind the controversy was a person grappling with consequences she may not have anticipated. As the trial dragged on, tensions escalated both inside and outside the courtroom. Protesters gathered daily, holding signs with messages ranging from justice for athletes to free speech matters. Social media exploded with reactions after each session, with hashtags trending worldwide. Fans dissected every detail, debating whether the lawsuit was justified or if it went too far. Even late-night talk shows weighed in, using humor to lighten the mood. But the underlying seriousness of the issue remained impossible to ignore. For Caitlin Clark, the trial brought mixed emotions. On one hand, she appreciated the support from the WNBA and her fans. Knowing that so many people stood by her gave her strength during a difficult time. But on the other hand, reliving the controversy over and over again took its toll. Every day, reporters camped outside the courthouse, shouting questions about how she felt, what she thought, and whether justice would be served. It was exhausting, overwhelming, and sometimes infuriating. Her teammates noticed the strain. During practices, she seemed quieter than usual, lost in thought instead of fully focused on drills. Coaches pulled her aside, reminding her to take care of herself, to step away from the chaos whenever she needed to breathe. Friends encouraged her to lean on her faith and family, finding solace in the things that mattered most. Slowly but surely she began to find balance again, reminding herself that this moment wouldn't define her forever. Elle Duncan, meanwhile, faced mounting pressure. Each day in court felt like walking a tightrope, balancing between defending herself and acknowledging the harm her words had caused. She attended every session, sitting quietly beside her lawyers as witnesses recounted the fallout from her remarks. Outside the courtroom, she avoided interviews and public appearances, knowing anything she said could be twisted or misinterpreted. Anonymous sources claimed she spent hours rehearsing potential apologies, unsure of how or if they would ever be enough. The turning point came when Elle herself took the stand. For the first time since the controversy erupted, she addressed the situation directly. Her voice trembled as she apologized, saying she never intended to hurt anyone or reinforce harmful stereotypes. She admitted that her words were careless and acknowledged the pain they caused. It was a raw, vulnerable moment, one that left some observers moved and others skeptical. Was this genuine remorse or was it calculated damage control? Only time would tell. By the end of the trial, both sides had laid out their arguments, leaving the jury with a monumental decision to make. As deliberations began, the world waited anxiously for a verdict. Would the court side with the WNBA, setting a precedent for accountability in sports media, or would they rule in favor of free speech, allowing controversial opinions to remain unchecked? Everyone had a stake in the outcome, not just Caitlin, Elle, or the WNBA, but anyone who cared about equality, fairness, and the power of words. For Caitlin, the wait was agonizing. She tried to focus on basketball, channeling her energy into practice and games. But no matter how hard she pushed herself on the court, the uncertainty lingered. What would happen next? How would the verdict affect her career and her life? Questions swirled endlessly, keeping her up at night. Elle too braced herself for whatever came next. With her career hanging in the balance, she knew the verdict would shape her future in ways she couldn't predict. Friends close to her revealed that she spent hours reflecting on her actions, questioning how she'd let things spiral so far, out of control. Whether she emerged stronger or irreparably damaged depended entirely on the jury's decision. And then there was the rest of the world, watching, waiting, debating. Families discussed the case around dinner tables. Students analyzed it in classrooms, and co-workers argued about it over coffee breaks. It wasn't just a courtroom drama. It was a mirror held up to society, forcing everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about privilege, bias, and responsibility. No matter what happened, one thing was clear. This trial wasn't just about winning or losing. It was about sparking change, about challenging outdated systems and building a better, fairer future. For Caitlin, for Elle, and for everyone watching, the stakes couldn't have been higher, because in the end, sports aren't just games. They're reflections of who we are and who we want to become. The day of the verdict felt like a moment frozen in time. The courtroom was packed tighter than ever before. Reporters scribbling notes, cameras stationed outside, fans glued to their screens. Everyone held their breath as the jury filed back, their faces unreadable. For weeks, the trial had dominated headlines, sparked debates, and divided opinions. Now, finally, the world was about to get an answer. When the judge announced the decision, you could have heard a pin drop. Elle Duncan was found guilty of making defamatory and racially insensitive remarks. The room erupted into murmurs, some sighing in relief, others shaking their heads in disbelief. According to the ruling, she would have to pay substantial damages to the WNBA, a financial blow that sent shockwaves through her career. But the consequences didn't stop there. The court also ordered her to issue a public apology and undergo sensitivity training, steps meant to ensure accountability and promote growth. For many, the verdict felt like justice served. Supporters of Caitlin Clark celebrated, seeing it as a win not just for her but for athletes everywhere who face unfair criticism based on bias or stereotypes. Social media lit up with messages of triumph, hashtags like our accountability, matters trending within minutes. Fans praised the WNBA for standing firm and setting a precedent that discrimination wouldn't be tolerated. Not in sports, not anywhere. But not everyone agreed. Critics argued that the lawsuit went too far, claiming it stifled free speech and set a dangerous example. They worried about what this meant for open dialogue, insisting that people should be allowed to express unpopular opinions without fear of legal repercussions. Debates raged online, with comment sections turning into battlegrounds. Some even accused the WNBA of overreach, saying they were more interested in controlling narratives than fostering understanding. Amidst all the noise, Caitlin tried to focus on what mattered most: moving forward. The verdict brought a sense of closure, but it didn't erase the pain she'd endured. She still thought about the late nights spent scrolling through hateful comments, the doubts that crept into her mind, the pressure of carrying expectations beyond basketball. Those scars wouldn't fade overnight, but she reminded herself why she played the game: to inspire, to persevere, to show young fans that setbacks don't define you unless you let them. Her teammates noticed a shift in her energy after the verdict. It wasn't just relief, it was resolve. During practices, she pushed harder than ever, determined to prove that no controversy could dim her light. Coaches praised her leadership, pointing out how she encouraged younger players to stay focused, despite distractions. Off the court, she poured her energy into community outreach programs, visiting schools and hosting clinics. Seeing kids light up when they talked about basketball reminded her of her own childhood dreams and gave her renewed purpose. Elle Duncan, on the other hand, faced a different reality. Once a prominent voice in sports commentary, she now found herself ostracized and uncertain about her future. Anonymous sources close to her revealed that she struggled to come to terms with the verdict. While she complied with the court's orders, issuing a public apology and beginning sensitivity training, the damage to her reputation was undeniable. Sponsors who had once proudly partnered with her distanced themselves completely, leaving her finances strained and her career prospects bleak. Her public apology drew mixed reactions. In a televised statement, Elle admitted her mistakes, acknowledging the harm her words had caused. She expressed regret, saying she never intended to offend anyone and vowing to learn from the experience. Her voice trembled as she spoke, showing glimpses of vulnerability. Some viewers were moved, believing her remorse was genuine. Others remained skeptical, accusing her of performing for the cameras rather than truly changing. Behind the scenes, Ella reportedly grappled with guilt and frustration. Friends described her as a shadow of her former self, questioning whether she'd ever regain trust or respect in the industry. She spent hours reflecting on her actions, trying to understand how things spiraled so far out of control. Slowly, she began exploring new paths, writing essays, giving lectures, anything, to rebuild her image. Whether these efforts would succeed remained to be seen, but one thing was clear: Elle's life would never be the same. As the dust settled, the aftermath of the trial rippled through the sports world. The WNBA used the opportunity to reinforce its commitment to inclusivity and equality. League officials announced initiatives aimed at addressing bias and promoting fair representation. Players participated in workshops, learning how to navigate media scrutiny and advocate for themselves. Fans rallied behind the league, proud of its stance against discrimination and eager to see positive changes implemented. Still, tensions lingered. Debates about free speech versus accountability continued, with no easy answers in sight. Some argued that holding individuals accountable was necessary to create safer spaces for marginalized communities. Others believed that forgiveness should play a bigger role, emphasizing growth over punishment. These conversations weren't confined to sports. They spilled into classrooms, workplaces, and living rooms, challenging people to think critically about their own biases and behaviors. For Caitlin, the verdict marked a turning point, not just in her career but in her perspective. She realized that her platform came with responsibility. If she wanted to inspire change, she couldn't just focus on basketball. She had to use her voice to uplift others. She started speaking out about the importance of unity and understanding, urging fans to celebrate diversity instead of dwelling on division. Her message resonated deeply, earning her praise from activists and athletes alike. Meanwhile, Ella's journey toward redemption continued. Though her career in sports media seemed unlikely to recover fully, she found solace in writing. Her essays reflected on her mistakes, offering insights into the lessons she learned along the way. Some dismissed her efforts as too little, too late, while others acknowledged her willingness to grow. Either way, her story served as a reminder that actions have consequences and that healing takes time. By the end of it all, one thing became undeniable. This controversy changed everyone involved. For Caitlin, it was a test of resilience, a chance to rise above adversity and inspire others to do the same. For Elle, it was an opportunity for reflection, a wake-up call to consider the impact of her words. And for the rest of us, it was a moment to confront uncomfortable truths about privilege, bias, and responsibility. Because in the end, sports aren't just games, they're mirrors reflecting who we are. And this story, messy as it was, forced us all to look closer, think deeper, and strive for something better. Months after the verdict, life began to settle into a new rhythm. For some, at least. The storm that had once dominated headlines slowly faded from the spotlight, replaced by other stories vying for attention. But its impact lingered, shaping lives and conversations in ways no one could have predicted. For Caitlin Clark, Elle Duncan, and the entire sports community, the aftermath of the controversy wasn't just an ending, it was a beginning. For Caitlin, basketball remained her anchor. She returned to the court with renewed focus, letting her game speak louder than any headline ever could. Every three-pointer she sank, every assist she made, every defensive play she executed became a testament to her resilience. Fans cheered louder than before, not just because of her stats, but because of what she represented: strength, perseverance, and hope. Young athletes looked up to her as proof that you can overcome adversity if you stay true to yourself. Off the court, Caitlin embraced her role as a leader and advocate. She partnered with organizations dedicated to bridging divides, whether racial, gender-based, or socioeconomic. She spoke at events, sharing her story and encouraging others to find common ground despite differences. Her message was simple yet powerful. We're stronger together. It resonated deeply, earning her respect far beyond the world of sports. People who had never cared about basketball found themselves inspired by her words and actions. Her teammates noticed the change in her too. Gone was the quiet uncertainty that had haunted her during the height of the controversy. In its place stood someone more confident, more grounded, and more determined than ever. During practices, she pushed everyone around her to be their best, not through harsh criticism but through encouragement and example. Coaches praised her maturity, saying she handled the pressure of fame with grace and humility. Even opponents couldn't help but admire her tenacity and spirit. As for Elle Duncan, her path forward was less clear, but not without purpose. After complying with the court's orders, including issuing her public apology and completing sensitivity training, she stepped away from the media glare. For weeks, she kept a low profile, avoiding interviews and staying out of the public eye. Behind the scenes, though, she worked tirelessly to rebuild herself, not as a commentator but as a writer and thinker. Her essays started appearing online, each one tackling tough topics like bias, accountability, and personal growth. In them, she reflected on her mistakes, acknowledging how careless words can cause lasting harm. She admitted she hadn't fully understood the weight of her remarks until they spiraled out of control. But instead of making excuses, she leaned into vulnerability, showing readers the human side of her journey. Some dismissed her efforts as damage control, while others saw genuine remorse. Either way, her willingness to confront her flaws earned her a small but loyal following. Slowly, Elle began speaking at smaller venues, community centers, schools, workshops, sharing her story and urging others to learn from her missteps. She emphasized the importance of listening, of understanding perspectives different from your own. Her talks weren't polished speeches. They were raw, honest reflections that left audiences thinking long after she stepped off stage. While her career in sports media might never recover fully, she found meaning in using her experience to spark meaningful conversations. The WNBA, meanwhile, emerged from the controversy stronger and more united. The lawsuit against Elle Duncan set a precedent, sending a clear message that discrimination and harmful rhetoric wouldn't be tolerated. Players felt empowered knowing their league stood behind them, ready to defend their dignity and worth. Initiatives aimed at addressing bias and promoting inclusivity gained momentum, with players, coaches, and fans working together to create a culture of respect and equality. But perhaps the most profound impact was felt beyond the league itself. The controversy sparked national conversations about race, privilege, and representation, not just in sports but in society as a whole. Schools incorporated discussions about bias into their curriculums, using real-world examples to teach students about empathy and fairness. Corporations reevaluated their diversity policies, ensuring they walked the talk when it came to inclusion. Even casual sports fans found themselves reflecting on their own biases, questioning narratives they'd accepted without challenge. For Caitlin, seeing these ripple effects gave her a sense of purpose. Yes, she had endured pain and scrutiny, but she also inspired change. That realization fueled her determination to keep pushing boundaries both on and off the court. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but she welcomed the challenge. After all, progress rarely comes without struggle. Ella's story served as a reminder that accountability isn't just about punishment, it's about growth. By owning her mistakes and striving to do better, she showed that redemption is possible, even in the face of overwhelming criticism. Her journey wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't easy. But it proved that people are capable of change when they're willing to listen, learn, and evolve. And then there was the broader sports community, forever shaped by this chapter in history. Conversations about representation and fairness became part of everyday dialogue. Athletes spoke up more boldly, refusing to let stereotypes define them. Fans demanded better from commentators and analysts, holding them accountable for the narratives they perpetuated. Slowly but surely, The industry began shifting toward a future where talent and character mattered more than tired tropes. Of course, challenges remained. Not everyone agreed on the best way forward, and debates about free speech versus accountability continued. But even those disagreements carried value. They forced people to think critically, to engage with perspectives different from their own. And in doing so, they brought us closer to understanding. By the time another season rolled around, the drama surrounding Caitlin and Elle felt like a distant memory for many. Yet its lessons endured. Caitlin played with the same passion and skill that first captured hearts, but now she carried something extra, wisdom born of adversity. Elle wrote and spoke with newfound humility, her voice quieter but more intentional. The WNBA thrived, its commitment to equality shining brighter than ever, and fans? They watched games with fresh eyes, appreciating not just the athleticism but the humanity behind every player. Because in the end, sports aren't just about winning or losing. They're about connection, the shared joy of victory, the collective heartbreak of defeat, the stories we tell along the way. This story may have started with conflict, but it ended with growth. It reminded us that words matter, actions matter, and people matter most of all. And maybe, just maybe, it pushed us all to be a little kinder, a little braver, and a little more aware of the power we hold, to build each other up or tear each other down. Because when we choose kindness, when we strive for understanding, we don't just change sports, we change the world.